Welcome back to the Polished Podcast, where we embolden women in their faith and work. I'm your host, Jane Dorman. And did you know your work matters? And at Polished Network, we provide the connection you crave, professional development you deserve, and the gospel that you need. Join us each episode as we deep dive the themes we're exploring in the Polished community, featuring a variety of guests sharing their perspectives and experiences as Christian working women. Well, whatever brought you here today, we are so thrilled that you joined us, and I hope these stories spark a renewed sense of purpose and embolden you to flourish on your leadership journey. Well, this month, we're continuing our exploration of what it looks like to lead with love. And here's a thought-provoking fact for you. Did you know God loves diversity? I mean, it's evident in his original design of creation, in how Jesus practiced his ministry, and in the diverse array of people that we work alongside, am I right? However, life's undeniably complex, right? And so are people, which is why the focal point of today's conversation is crucial as we take a look at leading with love through the pursuit of equity, which is, as you'll see in today's conversation, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. It all begins with understanding. Now, before we go any further, I do want to acknowledge and even call out that today's conversation might venture into unfamiliar or even uncomfortable territory for some. I've come to learn that these are the kinds of conversations that we really need to have if we want to pursue growth, not just in our development as leaders in the workplace, but also in our spiritual development. I'm reminded in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, to imitate God, therefore, in everything that you do, because you are his dear children. Live a life filled with love, following the example of Christ. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to God. Leading with love presents a challenge outlined in these verses to all leaders, urging us to embrace spiritual authenticity. This means engaging with God in every aspect of our lives, including navigating the realms of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. In today's episode, we're joined by Kelley Johnson, the tech founder and CEO of KEIRUS, a technology-based consulting and leadership development firm focused on transforming workplace cultures through diversity, equity, and inclusion. Kelley is a gracious expert in this area and a safe space to explore the world of DEI, and I think you're going to learn a lot from her perspective. I cannot wait for you to join the conversation we had as Kelley invites us to consider how pursuing equity in our workplace is a call to lead with love. So let's get to it. Polished Network Polished Giving Day is March 8th. That's right, on International Women's Day. Will you help us reach our $15,000 goal? Consider being a matching donor. Your contribution directly impacts spiritual connection, professional growth, and fights isolation for working women. Support our mission and give your gift at polishednetwork.org/give on Polished Giving Day. Let's create a supportive space where women flourish together. Save the date, March 8th, and make a difference with Polished Giving Day. A notable posture Kelley takes in this conversation is that of a lifelong learner. This was a conversation I was nervous to pursue because I felt so out of my depth. And Kelley reminded me at the start that we're all on an evolution as lifelong learners. We will never arrive to a full understanding in this life. We will constantly evolve and grow as we keep moving forward in this space. Because everyone's story starts somewhere. Kelley's evolution into this space is rooted in her childhood experiences, where she learned the impact of being the other and the importance of empathy.
How I would sometimes come home from school and cry to my mother because I felt like I was the only chocolate chip in a cookie. And in my mind as a kid, who wants to eat a cookie with only one chocolate chip, right? Yeah. So in my mind, I was creating this environment that was undesirable because I was the only one who looked like me. And beyond kind of the color of my skin, I was sort of carrying this extra burden of not always having a lot, not always having, for example, a great lunch, sort of trying to minimize and cover up like how much I either did or didn't have in my lunch. And so growing up, I always felt very othered, very much an outsider. And so as an adult, when I enter a room and I don't necessarily know a lot of people, or if I'm in a room where I'm very comfortable, I know a lot of people, I try to look for the person who appears to maybe not know a lot of people or maybe do not feel quite as comfortable. And because I know what it's like. I know what it's like to feel like an outsider or like you don't belong.
God developed a heightened awareness within Kelley throughout her life. This desire to understand and connect with people, which sounds great on paper, but Kelley found within the business world, this deep desire to connect and understand people got lost in translation.
I started my career in marketing and advertising where you're really trying to connect with customers, right? To grow your business.
Sure.
And so from my standpoint, I felt like, okay, if we are not connecting with customers, if we're not connecting with employees, we're not going to be successful as a business, as an industry. And if we truly want to connect with people, we have to understand them. We have to understand their experiences to really figure out how they might want to connect with the brand and not necessarily lump all of our customers into these little boxes that we create. And typically we tend to create boxes that look just like us, that think just like us. And so from a customer standpoint, that's very risky as a business because you're not going to be innovative if you think that all of your customers think, live, and work in the same way that we do.
Kelley really pinpoints something all of us need to consider when it comes to our work, and that it's really easy and, dare I say, efficient to take the path of least resistance to get the job done. And sometimes that can mean creating generalizations based solely out of our own experiences and our own worldviews so that we can be more productive. And friends, we know the way of love is not necessarily the productive way. Throughout her career, Kelley encountered so many stories of women and people of color who would share their stories of struggling to be valued in the workplace for their contributions and really felt like they were passed over for promotional opportunities despite doing all the right things. With each story shared and life experience, Kelley came to a realization.
One of the biggest lessons I learned is that I've got to focus on loving my team and serving my team. And I think early in my leadership journey, I thought that my role was to be right. My job was to be sort of kind of out front and let the team do the work. And, I would say that being in some corporate environments or some workplaces, your day is not even structured to love and serve your team, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I was in meetings all day, back to back, and yet I was neglecting my team. And I would say that that was a really painful lesson to learn as a leader, but to just recognize that my ultimate job, especially if I am a Christ follower, is to really make sure that I'm creating space to love people.
The most important way we can lead our teams well is with love at the forefront. Kelley really challenges us to consider, how are we making ourselves accessible? How are we posturing ourselves in a way to connect with our team and understand the needs of the people that we lead and work alongside?
Different people may be dealing with different circumstances that not everyone else is. I'll give an example.
Yes, please.
If you think about the Jewish and Muslim community right now, with the conflict between Israel and Hamas, our job is to love. As believers, our job is to love. And that means even loving people of different, either religious or cultural backgrounds. And so if you have someone on your team, or even a coworker, right? Maybe there's someone in another department, but that you work with them on a regular basis. If you know that they are from some of those affected communities, a demonstration of love and sort of interrupting the normal broadcast of our jobs, really to check in on people and see how they're doing. When George Floyd happened, the murder of George Floyd happened a few years ago, one of the most common requests that people in the Black community talked about was, no one asked me if I was okay. No one.
Yeah.
Right. Instead, I was asked, where's that report? Right. Where are you on this project? And so there's this expectation that people should function normally. Meanwhile, they are grieving, they are reliving trauma. And yet there's this expectation from leaders at times that people should just keep working regardless of that trauma or the triggers from what could be happening in a societal or cultural level. And I think that we are missing opportunities to love people and to share and demonstrate the love of Christ by just checking on people to see how they're doing and what could you possibly do maybe to support them or encourage them.
Today's conversation with Kelley will continue after the break. When we come back, we're going to navigate together what it looks like to understand the emotional weight others may carry and how we as leaders can embrace vulnerability and empathy. So stick with us. You may have heard of employee resource groups, and maybe your company has them. But did you know that many companies have Christian employee resource groups that provide support for integrating your faith in your work? Some of those companies include American Airlines, Intel, Texas Instruments, and PayPal. You can learn more about what it looks like to start a Christian employee resource group, including how to address HR and legal concerns at the virtual T-Factor event Polished is offering in partnership with the Rooted Sisters. It's scheduled for Wednesday, February 21st, and registration is free. So if you're interested, go to polishednetwork.org to learn more or click the link in our show notes below. We're learning to lead with love this week with our good friend Kelley Johnson, who is encouraging us to love our teams through empathy. Now, let's be honest for a second here and consider the fact that embracing vulnerability can sometimes be awkward.
And I think that's something that we need to maybe just call out. Leaders embrace vulnerability, right? And this is a challenge and an encouragement at the same time to embrace the vulnerability. I'm a dance mom, so my daughter is a dancer and keeps me busy. I know.
For sure.
And a couple of the moms on the dance team are Jewish. And even though I do this work all day, every day, I missed an opportunity to check on, in particular, a mom that I have frequent conversations with, right?
Sure.
And so when the light bulb hit, like, oh my gosh, I haven't checked on her. I just sent her a quick text and I said, hey, I know there's a lot going on right now in Israel. I just wanted to see if you're okay, if your family is okay. I didn't know if she had family in Israel or not. But she was so appreciative of that quick text message, right? That took me no time. In a kind of in-person encounter where maybe it feels even more vulnerable or awkward. Some of it is based on like, how much do you know about the person? Do you know if they are Jewish? Do you know if they are Palestinian or Muslim? Or, you do need to know a little bit of context about the person. But I think a very sort of non-threatening way to bring it up is to say, hey, I know there's a lot happening, maybe in the Asian community right now with COVID. So I'm going back to the spike in anti-Asian hate that we saw during COVID, right? So if you are encountering someone or if you're interacting with someone who appears to be a part of the Asian community, you could possibly say, hey, I know there's a lot going on right now with COVID and sort of this anti-Asian sentiment. How are you doing? Right? So it's not a, hey, I know you're Asian, so are you okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. No.
So try to avoid the assumption that you know exactly who a person is and what they believe and what their
Sure.
backgrounds are, but just more of a, how are you doing? I know there's a lot happening right now. Could be a way to open the door for conversation and learning, and to also show support.
Mm. I love that. And that's such a simple, like, first step, right? I love how you brought up that leaders embrace vulnerability. And sometimes I think that can be scary, but, I think by taking that step and just like you said, like, just start with, how are you doing?
Yeah.
That opens that door for a deeper conversation and creates that bond, creates room for empathy to grow between the two parties in the conversation. And wow, it would just lead us to a deeper understanding of each other as well. And I think that's encouraging. And it seems so simple, and it also feels awkward and hard, but I think that's the beauty of it, right? Like, nothing is, we're not simple people, we're complex.
Hey, can I just add?
Yes, please.
So a lot of our listeners are women. And so I think I just want to share maybe an example that could be a bit more broad for, for the polished audience of predominantly women. And that is, if you know that a woman perhaps had a pregnancy, but the pregnancy did not come full term, right? Yeah. You know that she is grieving, and you know that that is a very difficult conversation to navigate. But I think the same desire to empathize and be vulnerable and be supportive of someone who's grieving, I think use the same grace, use the same gentleness, and recognizing that it's a very hard topic, right? And yet I think many of us would be very willing to try to show support in that way for something like, the loss of a child, or maybe a parent who is dealing with a sickness. Apply those same empathy skills and sense of grace to yourself and to the other person. Even when we are talking about other communities that we might be less familiar with. So I hope that connection helps a little bit.
Gosh, just finding those points of connection and being seen and seeing others in their grief. I think it's such a skill for us to learn to hold that space, not necessarily fix it, but just like hold that space with them. And that's where that connection piece happens. I don't know. I just love this piece of connecting and seeing others. And I love how your story was kind of, I admittedly, it was probably hard, being, quote, the other, in your community, but how you allowed your story to help pave this way. And the work that you do with KEIRUS and diversity, equity, inclusion. Could you share with us about the work that you do with KEIRUS, and what is your mission, and who do you serve through your mission?
Oh, thank you. And thank you for just the support and the encouragement. I appreciate that. Yeah. So KEIRUS is a technology-based consulting and leadership development firm. We are really all about culture transformation in workplaces. I do want to say that the majority of our clients are sort of Fortune 500 and mid-size organizations. So we unfortunately haven't had a ton of opportunities to work with faith-based organizations, but I think that in terms of like the nuts and the bolts of what we do, we provide very full service strategy consulting, culture assessments, workplace culture assessments. We help organizations create a strategy to attract, develop, and retain talent. And we work with a lot of employee resource groups or culture committees to help execute on those strategies and programs. So those are just a few quick examples of the type of work that we do. We also provide executive coaching and leadership development programs. We really enjoy working with women and other underrepresented communities to help create those growth and development opportunities so that they can advance their careers.
That's awesome. And I love that you serve a lot of, traditional corporate workplaces in the work that you do. Cause I feel like those, well, all workplaces need it, but I really just feel like when faith-oriented people go into those spaces, like we can make such crucial impact, especially with the connections that we make in those workplaces. And I'm curious that, in the work that you do and the clients that you help and serve, how do you integrate your faith into your leadership development and the diversity initiatives that you pursue?
Yeah. So the name KEIRUS is Greek. The origin is Greek, and it means grace, goodwill, and kindness. I actually got the inspiration for the name by listening to a sermon. And yeah. And so I share that to say that we have always really operated from values that are God honoring in our interactions with our clients, whether they're faith-based or not. And our vision really and our mission is to light the world, to create transformative growth. And so within that kind of vision and mission statement, we don't actually mention DEI. And we're not mentioning God or anything, but you can see how the principles and the methodologies are really grounded in sort of Christian values or faith-oriented values. And yet they are approachable and accessible to people who have no faith, no belief in God at all, right? Or people who are of faith. And so our goal and our desire is to really meet people exactly where they are. And we also want to honor and respect the boundaries of safety for people. So for those individuals who are atheist or agnostic, we respect that and we honor exactly who they are and where they are. And for those who do connect on a faith level, we're happy to also engage in that way as well.
That's so cool. Like, I love the diversity of your client base. And, because I feel like when we have this conversation of faith and work, I had one recently with a friend of mine who's like, well, I don't bring my religion into my workplace. And I'm like, well, we're not asking you to have a Bible study or a prayer meeting in your office, but it's how do you show up? How does your faith integrate within you? What are your values, your faith-based values, and how are you bringing that into the workspace? And what I'm hearing you say is that we have values. We don't, they're not outright religious, but they're values that most, if not all, people can embrace. And that's how we show up into the workplace, and we respect the boundaries of others, which I feel like that's very Jesus oriented. Like Jesus respected the boundaries of others and allowed people to come as they are. And I mean, I feel like that's what we're supposed to do as disciples. We're supposed to go out into the world and be that light transformation, like you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So whether or not you work for a quote Christian organization or not, because that's the call for all of us. So I think that's so cool. What a gift that is to any organization that works alongside you guys. But in your experience in the work that you do, what are some of the key challenges that you're seeing that organizations or individuals commonly face when they're trying to cultivate these cultures that embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Right. So at the time that we are recording this episode, and I know it'll be available forever, but we're really in 2023 about to enter into 2024. We're in a climate that there's a lot of anti-DEI sentiment. And I would say it's a challenge for individuals and organizations to really understand, okay, so what can I do? There's been legislative and judicial decisions that could be perceived as, it's harder to actually have a focus on inclusion and diversity. And no one wants to break the law, clearly, ourselves included. And yet, what we have found is that being inclusive and appreciating the diversity of all people, wanting to be equitable and fair and respectful is something that a lot of our clients, all of our clients and other organizations still value. It's still a priority to them. And in terms of the challenges, I would say it's really knowing how to navigate the climate that we're in, the backlash that could come, whether you are trying to focus on DEI, diversity and inclusion, or if you're not, right? There's potential pressure either way. And I think that's a challenge. I would also say we are on a very practical level. A lot of our clients are seeing challenges with retaining talent, retaining women in the workplace. How do you develop them and keep them engaged and provide career paths that women in other communities are really interested in? So those are just a few. I would say engagement and retention of talent are big priorities and challenges. Also just recruiting, getting people to come in the door, but then also having them stay are all challenges that many of the organizations that we interact with are facing right now.
So how does KEIRUS address those challenges, or how do you help these organizations navigate these various challenges?
Sure. We are very data driven, so we love to look at their data and really kind of peel back the layers of the onion to understand what have been some of the historic trends so that we can recommend strategies and programs that really laser focus where we need to kind of provide more resources or support. Training, diversity, equity, and inclusion training is always a very foundational, I call it table stakes. Like you just, you have to provide training around these topics, and it has to be more than just like one and done. Like, oh yeah, we did unconscious bias training 3 years ago, right? It has to be ongoing. And so we have a multi-year curriculum around diversity and inclusion that organizations can provide on an ongoing and annualized basis. So that's super important. And then I would also go back to things like we work with organizations and in particular human resources departments. We help them come up with strategies around attracting and recruiting talent. We help them come up with programs and strategies to help them retain. And the retention piece is usually centered around leadership development. And are you providing pathways for people to grow and progress in their career? So we will sometimes facilitate leadership development programs or help them come up with their own.
So what I'm hearing is diversity, equity, inclusion, this training, like you said, it's not one and done. It's an ongoing process that you walk alongside these organizations because we're always learning. It's always evolving, as we evolve as leaders. Especially in this space and these challenges, even the pushback that you may receive. And I will say, I resonated when you mentioned that there's a lot of anti-DEI out there. I have witnessed that in the circles that I'm a part of. And unfortunately, some of the circles that I see this happen the most in are the ones that I consider my Christian circles, my Christian circle of friends who really struggle with that. And I don't know, when I'm in those conversations, I get kind of confused because isn't that what we want? Like, what do you think is this like underlying tension in this DEI conversation that's happening?
I'm so glad you asked that question. And I will say that I don't fully understand it. Okay. I want to be a student in this conversation too, because I believe that, so I look at it two ways, business and from a faith perspective. From a business angle, if you want to be innovative, if you want to have long-term growth, you need employees who are reflective of the communities where you work and live, right? Like that is very foundational from a business longevity and innovation standpoint. Sure. On a Christian level, this is where it gets a little personal for me, in that I've been so disappointed by the one community, right? Like we all love Jesus, right? So how can it be that we both love Jesus, we both love God, but we don't all want to build bridges and pursue justice that the Bible talks about quite a bit, right? Like these are all, my personal view is that when we can love people who are not like us, it is the greatest demonstration of our faith and our Christianity. The number one commandment is to love God with all that you are and to love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yeah.
And Jesus, red letter Jesus, said that, right? So, and it's not easy. It's not easy to love. It's not easy to love the people who might be in your house sometimes.
Yep.
Right?
Amen to that. Yep.
Yeah. But we should all be striving to learn to love people exactly who they are, exactly where they are in life. And there are many biblical examples of Jesus demonstrating that. It's Micah 6:8 that talks about, and there's other verses in the Bible that talk about justice. And there are times when God was not happy with the children of Israel because of their dealings with people were not honest. They weren't fair. You know, they were kind of skewing the scales when they were measuring how much to pay people. And God talks about, like, how can you do that? That's not, you are not honoring me when you are not just and fair. And so I think that there are many scriptural examples of how God does care about justice. He does care about the way that we treat people. And I see learning to love people who are different from us as one of the greatest ways that we can demonstrate the love of Christ.
And I hear that, and I love that. I love that example. I think we need more examples to highlight in the Bible of where we are called to pursue social justice as Christians, because I feel like whenever that topic comes up in conversation, like, again, that tension is there. Like, what is our role? What is social justice? You know, what is social justice, but like biblical social justice, if you will, because I feel like there is a difference in definition of what God means when he says social justice and maybe what society is saying is social justice. So, you know, I feel like as Christians, we grapple with how to navigate this and also trying to stay true to our faith. So how would you approach this dilemma? Like, what guidance would you provide to individuals who are trying to reconcile their Christian faith with a commitment to pursuing social justice? Like, what does that look like for you?
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's an area that I've been passionate about for a while. And a couple of years ago, the Lord led me to write Infinite, The Power of Love, which is a 6-session Bible study on DEI, right? Because I really wanted to, I've been doing this work in corporate America for over 20 years, but I never had the opportunity to speak directly to, like, my people, right?
Nice. I love that. Yes, we need it.
It's like, I want to talk to other believers, right? Who do wrestle and struggle with how do I fit into this? How does my faith fit into this? So that's definitely a resource. But I would also say that, and this might feel a little ouchy, but so just put your seatbelt on.
Lay it on us.
But I believe that as a part of this journey, in addition to pursuing what does the Bible say about justice, what are the biblical examples of diversity and inclusion? So I think that's foundational to this quest of understanding. I would also say another key aspect of this journey and this pursuit is really questioning and trying to understand, why do I have a problem with it? Why am I triggered by the conversations around justice or equity, diversity, inclusion? And I would venture to say, for some, not all, that there could be a level of greed, not wanting to share not
Sure.
wanting to feel as if you are giving up something. And I think that there could be an element of, I want to hold on to what I have. And I think for believers, there could be an opportunity to grow our faith. So if we are afraid of losing something, and that's a very legitimate concern. So if we are afraid, who do we take our fears to? Right?
Yeah. Right.
Is this an opportunity to trust God further? Right? Like, Lord, I'm afraid of, if I do X, that this might harm me. It might harm my career. It might harm my family. Take those concerns to the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. No, those are legit fears that I think all of us struggle with on some level. And I've been really challenged this past year, personally speaking, of, am I chasing biblical fruit or spiritual fruit, or am I chasing worldly fruit, like the money, the status, the acclaim? I don't know, like anything that's outside of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. I can't believe I listed all of them.
Good for you. That is so impressive.
I was just like, woo, Holy Spirit activate. That was awesome. But anyway, but like you said, like, it's so, I'm going to go back to this path of least resistance. Like, I find myself, and I'll speak personally here, that when I really wrestle with something like this, like, what is my role in this? Or if I get triggered because I fear of a loss, whatever that loss may be, it is so much easier to do a Google search or ChatGPT or whatever to get somebody to directly tell me what to do, as opposed to turning it and laying it at Jesus's feet. Because, and sitting with that. And sometimes I think sitting with that is so uncomfortable that we don't want to stay in that space and allow Jesus to start peeling back, like those like, like you said, like, it could be greed, it could be pride, it could be, gluttony. I mean, you name it, whatever sin. I mean, sin is sin, and it's so like deep within us that sometimes I think we just try to keep going. And when something comes up against us, and it forces us to sit with this, like, well, I don't like how this feels, and I don't really want to sit in this or hold this space because this is very uncomfortable. I just want it fixed. I just want it to go away. And I think that's a challenge God is calling us to as believers, is to, what does it look like for me to say, okay, I'm really wrestling with this idea of social justice. I'm really like, either something's not clicking for me, or like, why is this stirring? Why is this triggering me? And then, like you said, like, what would it look like, instead of like pushing it aside or doing a quick Google search to find something that will already affirm what I've already believed, to be like, oh, you're okay. And instead sit in that uncomfortable space with Jesus and be like, what gives? Like, okay, what am I missing here? Right? I mean, is that like what we should be doing? I don't know, am I wrong?
Right.
Yeah. So, what a gift that, again, I'm going to plug your, it's a Bible study, correct? Your Infinite, the Power of Love. We are going to link that in the show notes. But when we had met previously, you had mentioned that you look at diversity examples through the Bible, and you gave us one in Micah. Could you give us like another specific example in the Bible of where the Bible just really highlights this idea of diversity in our faith?
Sure. I mean, I think when Jesus spoke to the woman, the Samaritan woman at the well, that's a great cultural difference between two communities that had a lot of tension historically. And I believe we cover this one in Infinite, and I think it's either in Luke 6 or 7, but it's the woman who brings who wipes Jesus's feet with her tears and her hair. And we look at that biblical story and we kind of dissect it. We don't actually focus as much on the woman. We focus on Simon, the host of the dinner.
Right.
Because it's most of the time, at least at church, it's really been about the woman and what she did. And it was a little controversial. She worshiped Jesus in a very brazen and bold way culturally, right?
Sure.
To take your hair down in public and wipe Jesus's feet. And it was just so bold, right? In front of people at dinner, right? And so in the Bible study, we look at Jewish culture and traditions around sort of the dinner meal, the supper meal. And we talk about, well, what did Simon, as the host of the meal, what did he do? What did he not do? And we look at Jewish culture around hospitality. Simon actually missed the mark from just Jewish cultural standards of hospitality in about 3 different occasions, I believe. And so while the focus was on like judging this woman, Simon missed a few opportunities to show hospitality, to show kindness. And so I think that those are examples biblically of it doesn't matter what the other person did. It doesn't matter what the woman was doing per se. She wasn't harming anyone and she didn't break a law or anything like that. So I'm not justifying behavior that is illegal, unethical. But what I am saying is that at a basic level, we can all show kindness and create a welcoming environment for every single person. And I think that is an example of how inclusion and belonging is demonstrated biblically.
I love that. I love that example. I love just this idea, again, like you had shared earlier, like it's these basic, simple steps that we can take to create hospitality in the conversations that we have to again, as leaders, embrace that vulnerability, to make that connection with that other person. And something you said in a previous meeting we had is that, empathy is like the central theme in the work that you do. And it's when we embrace this vulnerability, it's when we take that simple first step of the how are you or what's going on in your life. It's creating spaces where empathy can grow. Could you share some practical tools or strategies we can use to cultivate empathy towards those who may be at a disadvantage?
Sure. I think it's important to try to understand people's stories, right?
Right.
Sometimes we can focus on, well, this person is this and I don't agree with it. And even biblically, this goes against biblical values. And it's easy to just sort of stop, like have our brain stop there with, I don't agree. It's not biblical. It's not Christian. Therefore, I won't engage. And I think that love, Jesus certainly pursued me when I was not doing things well, right?
Right.
And I still mess up, but I think Jesus pursues us with love and understanding. And I think we have an opportunity to do the same for other people. And one of the ways that I have found that helps me is to sort of understand, where is the person coming from? What, sort of maybe either prompted that decision or that action or that thought, that belief, whatever. And so understanding people's stories, but I also think, and for some reason, the word kindness or the spirit of kindness is just really strong, I believe, for me to emphasize today on this episode. And I'm remembering a story of, or a time when I was in a meeting, just a normal meeting with a particular attorney that worked at the company that I was working at the time. And we were working on a project. It was nothing big. It wasn't even a contentious situation. Obviously, when lawyers are involved, I think some of us can tense up.
Sure.
But, it was not anything contentious at all. And I just remember walking away, a female attorney, by the way. I remember walking away from that meeting thinking, she just wasn't a very nice person. Okay, no biggie.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward a few years later, I learned that she attended church with a friend of mine.
Interesting.
And I was like, okay, that's interesting. You said interesting too.
I did.
I'm like, I didn't peg her as a Christian, right? Just based on that interaction. And I know we have bad days, right? I know some days are not great and we're not 100%. Mm-hmm. But in the time that we worked at the same company, there really wasn't any interactions on a basic kind of kindness level that would have given me an indication that she was a fellow believer. And so I just really feel led to emphasize kindness for some reason. And I think that it doesn't mean that we're not firm or assertive. It does not mean that we don't have boundaries. So please hear my heart when I say, kindness is so important. And it's such a simple way for us to demonstrate the love of Christ. But if people are not sure that even from a value standpoint, being empathetic, being kind, if people don't ever get that from us, then I think that we have an opportunity to really grow and to really think about how can I demonstrate some of the basic character of our God in my everyday interactions. And I just believe that kindness is a very simple, low threshold way that we can do that.
I love that. Yes, kindness, I think, is an underrated spiritual fruit. And I think if we embrace that more, like we are creating fertile ground for those conversations to happen, and even opportunities to be that light in the dark places that we enter in, whether that's your workplace or the supermarket. I don't know. There's always an opportunity to be kind, and I love that. That's definitely something we can all grow in for sure. Wow. Kelley has been blowing my mind with her perspective. What a gift this conversation is to us. We're going to go ahead and take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to switch things up and put Kelley in the Ask Me Anything hot seat when we return. So don't move a muscle. Hey, Polish Network, I am really excited to tell you about a brand new podcast, Holy Curiosity with Kat Armstrong. Kat's the co-founder of Polish Network and a fierce advocate for working women. Kat's mission in life is to spark holy curiosity in Bible readers. That's why the Holy Curiosity podcast follows a person, a place, or a thing in the Bible so that we can all appreciate the genius storytelling of God. Kat, along with Bible scholars and special guests like Drs. Tim Mackey, Lynn Kohik, Michelle Knight, Nijay Gupta, and Diane Langberg, will guide us through storied connections threaded throughout Scripture. And Kat's not afraid to talk about hard topics. For instance, Kat's first miniseries is about the abuse Dinah experiences in Genesis 34. Go subscribe to Kat's new show, Holy Curiosity. You can find more information about Holy Curiosity on Kat's website, katarmstrong.com/podcast. Or you can click the link in our show notes. Check it out today. Well, welcome back, friends, to the Polish Podcast. We hope you're enjoying our conversation here today with our guest, Kelley Johnson. But now it's time to add a dash of spontaneity and a sprinkle of fun to the show. It's time for Ask Me Anything. So, Kelley, this is how it's going to work. We want a chance to peel back the layers and get to know the woman behind the work, the quirks behind the expertise. So I'm going to ask you a few questions here that we've curated for you, and we're just following our curiosity to know more about you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, first and foremost, the day that we're posting this episode, it is Black History Month. And so we are asking all of our guests, if you could host a dinner party and invite 3 historical figures, either living or deceased, who have significantly impacted Black history, who would they be and what conversations would you hope to have with them?
So I think an obvious one is MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., right?
Yes.
Harriet Tubman.
Yeah.
And then a third would actually be my great-great-grandmother, who actually helped start the first church in the Dallas area.
Really?
Way back in the day. She's not listed anywhere historically because women were not. But I would love to know more about her story and her journey of leading so boldly and really fighting for her faith to make sure that her community actually had a place of worship.
Oh my goodness. What a legacy to have in your family. That's so cool.
Thank you.
And a shame that she wasn't listed. I know history. We continue to evolve, right? So
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, okay. So question number 2 is, I'm sure you work long and very busy days. What's your favorite way to unwind and relax at the end of the day?
So I'm actually not great at that.
Oh boy, this is becoming a theme with some of my guests here.
Yeah, that's definitely.
What would your ideal way? Yeah.
Okay, ideal. I like that. Okay, so I would say working out. I do try to go on a walk most evenings after work.
Okay.
And I usually try to go with my husband and our dog.
That's cool.
And that's one of the simple ways that I'm doing it. But I would say I'd love to kind of amp up my workouts and be a little bit more high energy.
Yeah. Do you have any particular workouts that you like styles that you like?
So I really enjoy Pilates.
Yes.
And cardio. I found a person who does like gospel cardio. And that's like my latest thing that I'm doing. And I'm loving it because I feel like it's
really?
it's like a 2 for 1, like worship Jesus, get my workout on.
I'm going to have to get some notes on that because I'm having a hard time waking up in the morning, and I think moving and pairing those two together might have some fruit with that. So that's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. My final question for you, Kelley, is besides your own books that you've written, what's a book you often recommend friends or colleagues, and why?
I love the book Go Giver. I don't know the author, so you'll have to just Google it or look for it on Amazon. Okay. But Go Giver just really talks about giving first as a leader. It's not Christian, but it is really about giving first of yourself, of your services, of your knowledge, of your support, with no expectation of getting anything back. So it's one of my favorites.
Awesome. Well, we will be sure to link to that book in our show notes. Go Giver. That sounds like a winner. I like that, going first as a leader. Well, Kelley, thank you so much for sharing with us a little bit about yourself. Here's the thing, friends. We want you to be a part of the conversation too. We want your burning questions and your curious musings about our guests. So if there's something you've just always wanted to ask, now's your chance. Go to our website, polishnetwork.org, and submit your questions there. Be a Polish Podcast MVP and send in those questions today. You'll get a mention and insight into your favorite guests. So we can't wait to dive in to those queries and unveil the surprises that await. Send in those questions today. Recent reports indicate that isolation, loneliness, and lack of leadership growth opportunities weigh heavily on working women today. And these are just some of the many reasons why the Polish Network is on a mission to embolden women in their faith and work. And we invite you to join us as a Polish partner. Visit polishnetwork.org/give and help us ensure a steady foundation for women to find the vital community they crave, the professional development they deserve, and the gospel they need. So Kelley, looking back at what we've discussed today, we've kind of went all over the place with DEI and empathy and kindness. What is one key takeaway or lesson that you would like our audience to remember, especially for those who are just striving to create more inclusive and equitable environments in their organizations or even their communities?
Sure. It's been a great conversation. And Jane, I just appreciate your invitation and your role in really facilitating this important conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah. I would say that kind of three things are coming to mind.
Okay.
The courage to be vulnerable. When we take the courage to be vulnerable, we can ask questions and learn more about people's stories and situations. In order to be empathetic, we need the context. So without knowing the story, sometimes it can be a little difficult to be empathetic. And once we understand the story and we can strive to demonstrate empathy, that's where kindness comes in. So how can I show love? How can I be kind in this moment? So the courage to be vulnerable, the context to be empathetic, and the willingness to be kind and to show and demonstrate kindness.
I love that. Thank you for just challenging us with that. I know I'm going to take those 3 bullet points home with me to really marinate on it and just see where are the spaces where I need a little bit extra courage to create that context and to be more kind with the people around me. I just really appreciate you. We're probably going to have you on again because this is such a deep conversation and so many different ways we can go with it. But I just really appreciate your time coming on here and sharing the work that you do. Kelley, how can people connect with you or the work that you do online?
Sure. So we are at KEIRUS by KJE.com. KEIRUS by KJE.com. And then also LinkedIn. We're very active. So we would love to connect with you all on LinkedIn. And happy to partner with you. We just launched a mastermind leadership development program. So that's a great way for people who are looking to just grow their leadership development in a community style. I know the collaboratories with Polished are also another great resource. So I want to do a dual plug there.
Nice. Yes.
But yeah, LinkedIn, KEIRUS by KJE, and then our website.
All right. Well, we will be sure to link all those ways to connect with Kelley in our show notes. So be on the lookout for those. Kelley, thank you so much for coming on here today. It's been such a joy to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Today's conversation with Kelley has challenged me to consider how I am evolving in the spaces of vulnerability, empathy, and kindness. How about you? What's your key takeaway from today's conversation? Here are 5 of mine. Leaders embrace vulnerability. Avoid making assumptions about others and start with, how are you doing? DEI is an ever-evolving space that requires continuous training and education. The best approach to understanding is to adopt a student mindset that's open to learning. The greatest demonstration of our faith is the ability to love and understand people who are different from us, reflecting the love and character of Jesus Christ. Well, let's compare notes. I want to know what your key takeaways are from our conversation today. You can share those on our Instagram post for this episode and let me know what's resonating with you. Well, as we draw near to the end of this episode, I want to extend our deepest appreciation to those who make the Polish Podcast possible. The Polish Podcast is supported in part by a grant from Coca-Cola Consolidated. Special thanks to Kelley Johnson for sharing her spirit of kindness with us. Be sure to check out her book and her Bible study that are linked in today's show notes. To our listeners, thank you so much for your unwavering support. Your engagement and your feedback drive us to create content that resonates with you. And a heartfelt thank you to the Polish Network for cultivating a community where working women can thrive and connect. A big thank you and shout out to White Oak Christian Church for your partnership in the production process of these episodes. And as we move forward from this conversation today, let's carry this thought from Kelley.
How can I demonstrate some of the basic character of our God in my everyday interactions? And I just believe that kindness is a very simple, low threshold way that we can do that.
Be sure to stay connected with us on social media and our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you could, please rate and review the Polish Podcast as well. Well, until next time, this is Jane Dorman signing off. Keep moving forward and remain emboldened.